guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be continuing our Unit 12 on measurement, and we're going to be talking about temperature. Before we do that, we're going to do a quick review of everything we've learned so far. So we have learned how to measure length and volume so far. With measuring length, we have a couple of different ways we can do that. In the United States, we use the U.S. customary system, which consists of inches, feet, and yards. We have 12 inches, which inches are about this big, or about the tip of your thumb to the bend of your thumb right there. That's an inch. And there are 12 of those inches inside of a foot. A foot is often called a ruler. So there are 12 inches in a ruler or 12 inches in a foot. This purple thing right here, that is our ruler, and there are 12 inches inside of it. Next, we have a yardstick. In a yardstick, there are 3 feet inside of that yard. That means that there are also 36 inches in that yardstick as well. It takes 3 rulers to make a yardstick. You might be familiar with the term yard because of football. We have several yards inside of a football field. We use yards to measure large items. We use feet to measure typically how tall a person is, and then we use inches to measure a little bit smaller unit. We also have something called the metric system. The metric system is what everybody else in the world uses. So this is another form of measurement, and in this they use centimeters and meters instead of inches and feet and yards. So in this they use tiny things called centimeters. If you take your ruler and rotate it, there's an inch side and a centimeter side. The centimeter side is the one that has more numbers on it, squished closer together. There are 100 centimeters in this meter stick. The meter stick is the one in the middle, and a meter is much larger than our normal ruler. There are 100 centimeters in this meter stick. There's only about 30 centimeters inside of our normal ruler. So our centimeters are the teeny tiniest one of them all, and our meter is actually the biggest one. So when we use a ruler, no matter if you use inch or centimeter side, you're always going to want to line up the object with the beginning of the ruler. Now, if your ruler has a 0, that's where you're going to start. If it has no 0, you're going to start at the first mark. This one has a 0, so I'm measuring this pin in centimeters. If I line up the tip of the pin with 0 to the end, it measures at 10 centimeters. And I'm going to abbreviate that with the letters cm. Now, if I want to measure using the inch side of the ruler, I'm going to rotate the ruler to the inch side. I'm going to set the tip of the object I'm measuring, which is this marker, with 0 and see how long it is. It comes right in between 4 and 5 inches, so this is going to measure in at 4.5 inches. To write that, you would write 4 holes and 1/2 as a fraction, and make sure you abbreviate it with IN for inches, because that is how we shorten the word inch. Next, if we wanted to measure the same marker with the ruler, but using centimeters, we would simply rotate the ruler, set the tip of the marker on the 0 mark, and see how many centimeters long it is. It is 12 centimeters. We abbreviate with cm for centimeter. Next, let's talk about estimating length. If you wanted to take a guess at how long something is, there are a couple of different ways you could do that. You're going to think about centimeters, inches, feet, yards, and meters. Among those, centimeters and inches are very small. So you're going to want to use those for small objects. If you're measuring a paperclip, a pencil, anything that you can measure with a ruler, you're going to want to use centimeters and inches for. Next, we have feet. Feet is kind of in the middle. And if you have something like the height of a person, the length of a bed, the length of a car, something like that, you're probably going to use feet to measure that. Next, we have yards and meters. Yards and meters are used to measure very large spaces, like a basketball court, a football field, a piece of road, something very, very big. You're going to probably want to use yards or meters for that. So when you are asked how long a certain object is, you just want to kind of sit and think about how long that object is, whatever you are trying to measure. Is it a big object, a small object? If it's small, probably centimeters, inches. If it's really big, probably yards and meters. All right, next we have learned about volume. In the United States, we use gallons, quarts, pints, and cups. We are very familiar with our gallon garden by now. We draw a very big G for King Gallon. Inside, we draw 4 Q's for his Queen's Gardens. And inside each of those Q's gets 2 P's for the Princess's Gardens. And inside of the 2 P's, we get 2 C's for the Cat Gardens. So if you draw your gallon garden, which I would, I have 4 quarts inside of this gallon because I have 4 Q's, 4 queens, 4 quarts. Inside of each quart, I have 2 P's, which stands for pints. And inside of each of those pints, I have 2 cups. So cups are the very smallest, then pints, then quarts, then gallons. So if we're going from largest to smallest, we have gallons, that's the biggest one, then quarts, then pints, then cups. We also have a metric system to measure this. Just like we have a different way to measure length, we have a different way to measure volume in other parts of the world. They use liters and milliliters. We typically do not use these, but we are familiar with the term a 2 liter. So a 2 liter is that big bottle of Coke or Dr. Pepper, and if you cut it in half, that is 1 liter. And inside of that liter, we have 1,000 milliliters. So you can imagine how small a milliliter is. A milliliter is just about 20 drops of water. So if we are comparing all of them together, then we have gallon first, then below gallon, we have liter, and a liter and a quart are about the same size. Below that, we have pints. Below that, we have cups, and the tiniest of all is milliliters. Now, today we're talking about temperature. Temperature is measuring how hot or cold something is. The most familiar way that you're going to be used to seeing this is with a thermometer, and that would be the one that you typically stick underneath your tongue, take your temperature, or we now have the ones that you point at your head and also tell you your temperature from far away. We're very familiar with these as well because of COVID. So these two are our typical ways, and they're measuring the warmth of your body to tell if you have a fever or tell if you're just a normal average temperature like normal. But this is also called a thermometer, how we measure the temperature of outside. And this is the one we're going to be learning how to read today. There are 2 different ways that we measure temperature. We have Fahrenheit and Celsius. Fahrenheit is used in the United States, and we put an F after that temperature. The rest of the world uses Celsius, and they put a C after it. So Fahrenheit and Celsius are still both measuring temperature, but just with different scales, different numbers. So in the United States, we use Fahrenheit. Everybody say Fahrenheit. Fahrenheit, good. All right, we have a couple of important numbers here. You don't have to memorize these, but they're just a good thing to know. 32 degrees is when water starts to freeze. So if you want to have snow, it has to be at least 32 degrees outside. This is typically when it's going to be cold in the winter time. It's going to be about 32 degrees outside. Once it gets nicer, it gets up into about the 70s, and then in the summer, sometimes it gets up into the 90s, 80s when it's really hot. But in the winter time, it's around the 30s, the 40s, the 20s, and really cold if it's the teens or below 0. Now, our body temperature is normally at 98 degrees. If your body goes up to 100 degrees or above, you typically have a fever. So when you're sick, your temperature will be above 100 degrees. The next one that I want to talk about is the boiling point. This is how hot water has to be before it boils, 212 degrees. That's very hot. So when you boil water on the stove, if you touch that, it's going to burn you because it's very, very hot. Your body is only 98 degrees, and if you touch something that's 212 degrees, it's going to burn you and probably leave a mark. That is when water starts to boil. Now our oven, we always set our oven around 350 degrees, sometimes 400 degrees to bake things in or to cook things in. That is why your adult mom, dad, whoever you live with, typically is the one that does the oven because it's very, very hot. And they want to be very careful that you do not burn yourself. And when they go to take something out of the oven, they always put on an oven mitt because it's very, very hot, okay? Now, there are a couple of different ways to read a thermometer. This is our typical thermometer. We have a Fahrenheit side, which has an F, and we have a Celsius side, which has a C. In the United States, we use the Fahrenheit side. So this is how hot it would be with this thermometer. This is the red part in here is mercury, and as it gets hotter, the temperature goes up. If it is colder, the level of mercury will be lower. So here we have it reaching at 100 degrees. So it is 100 degrees Fahrenheit here. Or if I wanted to look over at the Celsius side, I could also read it in Celsius. The way that we would read this, because it's not on an exact big number, is we have to figure out how many degrees it's counting by. So here I have 30 and 40. And if I look very carefully, I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this is counting by ones here. So I'm going to count up to where this mark is at to figure out how hot it is. So I can see 30 and 40. In between that would be 35. So 36, 37, 38. This is about 38 degrees Celsius. The same exact temperature. How can that be? Well, it's just using a different scale. If you look very carefully down here, you'll see 0. The 0 degrees Celsius is exactly at 32 degrees Celsius for us. So 32 degrees is our freezing point, but 0 is the freezing point for Celsius. Now, let's practice reading this thermometer. This is Celsius. I can take a clue by looking for the letter. So I'm reading this as Celsius. So my answer is going to have a C after it. It also is going to have a degree sign. You also need to write a tiny little mark, a circle above or beside the number of your temperature. So here I'm going to figure out what is this skip counting by. Is it skip counting by 2s, 5s, 1s? So in between 0 and 10, let's see how many marks we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I know that each of these marks counts for just 1 degree. So as I look up here, I can see that this is past 20. It's not quite to 30, so it's going to be in the 20s. 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. So this temperature is 27 degree sign Celsius. So you're going to write the number 27, your degree sign, and then a C for Celsius. This one is going to be in Fahrenheit or Celsius. So I can look and read this in Fahrenheit or Celsius. Right here, it's asking me for Fahrenheit. So I'm going to look very carefully at this thermometer and try to read it using Fahrenheit. As you can see, our big numbers are skip counting by 20s. So these little marks in between are going to represent 10s. So I've got 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. And this little mercury mark is hitting right at about 70 degrees, okay? So we're looking at the Fahrenheit side because that's what I'm measuring it in. It's going to be at about 70 degrees Fahrenheit. We are reading this in Fahrenheit, so we're looking at the Fahrenheit side, okay? So it would be 70 degrees Fahrenheit. If I wanted to read this in Celsius, it would be around 21 or 22 degrees Celsius. Now, let's look at this thermometer. We're reading this in Celsius. Celsius is going to be this side over here, and unfortunately it got cropped a little bit, but this is a Celsius. We're looking at the left side. I know that because it says 0 degrees for freezing, and over here it's 32 degrees for Fahrenheit freezing. So we're looking at the left side here. If you look very carefully, these tick marks, we're trying to figure out what they're skip counting by. Are they skip counting by 1s, 2s? What are they skip counting by? So we've got 10s and 20s, so it's skip counting by 10s, but these little marks in between them are counting by 1s. So I've got 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So this would be 24 degrees Fahrenheit. 24 degrees Celsius. 24 degrees Celsius. So this is going to be Celsius. So this would be 24 degrees Celsius. Now, if we wanted to look at it in Fahrenheit, we would look over on this side, which we can see 60 to 80. And then this mark would be 70. Now, there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 marks in between 70 and 80. So these little tick marks are actually counting by 2s. So this would be 62, 64, 66 degrees Fahrenheit. So 24 degrees Celsius is our answer. This is a round thermometer. It's the exact same way that we're going to measure it, except for we are just looking at what it is. It is Fahrenheit, so this does not have Celsius on it. So I'm looking at where it's coming in between here. It's coming in between 60 and 80. So I'm guessing if this is 60 and this is 80, that this mark in between them is going to be 70. So somewhere in between 60 and 70 is where our thermometer or our temperature is going to be at. So this is actually skip counting by 2s because there's only 5 tick marks. If there's only 5 tick marks, it's skip counting by 2s. If there's 10 tick marks, it's counting by 1s. So 62, 64, 66. So this would be 66 degrees Fahrenheit. Next, let's go back to our normal thermometer, and we actually just did this one in Celsius. It was 24 degrees Celsius, so now we're finding out how hot it is or how cold it is with Fahrenheit. So if I'm looking over here, these are skip counting by 60 and 80. These are skip counting by 20s. So this middle mark is going to be 70. So I know that it's somewhere in between 70 and 80. I know that there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tick marks in between 70 and 80. So these tick marks are actually counting by 2s and not 1s. So 72, 74, 76, and our answer is 76 degrees Fahrenheit. I hope this video helped explain how to measure temperature. If you guys need any help, please feel free to ask. Thanks, guys.